Well, I would say it's in trouble in both countries. I think it's in worse difficulty in the United States than it is in Canada. And I think the nature of the problems are quite different because the two systems are different. So if you think of the American congressional system with checks and balances, the kind of problem you have is gridlock, the incapacity of governments to actually govern effectively. And in Canada with the parliamentary system, the difficulty is, in fact, keeping the government under control because it has so much executive power if it holds a majority in Parliament that it can almost do what it wants between elections. And that's why in Canada, many people call our Prime Minister the friendly dictator because there's little accountability or control in between elections. Well, if you think of democracy as self-government, then the link between citizens and government is absolutely crucial. And it's the citizens that express their will and preferences and who hold in principle at least, hold the government to account. It's the government that delivers on behalf of the citizens, serves the citizens. So if the link between citizens and government breaks down, you have a very serious problem. And that's, I think, part of what is happening in both the countries, and again, in somewhat different ways. But I think that the question of access to the political process in the United States is a significant issue with imposition difficulties in voter registration and the long lineups that President Obama mentioned. I think that active voter suppression techniques are used widely, and it's, again, an attempt to keep some citizens out of the democratic process. And then you have the gerrymandering, which is a plague on the American democratic system, in my opinion, which really serves the interests of politicians, but not the interests of citizens. In Canada, it's somewhat different in the sense that we have a French language community in Canada that's over a fifth of the population, mostly concentrated in Quebec. I've talked about the friendly dictator. The friendly dictator has very, very little representation from the province of Quebec, which means that the French language community in Canada is not represented around the cabinet table, not reflected in the kinds of decisions that the national government makes. So, and you see that in the policies that they are actually pursuing. I mean, they elevate the status of the monarchy in Canada, and yes, we are a monarchy. Queen Elizabeth is our queen. And the Conservatives are very keen to give her a bigger profile in the country. They are less concerned about gun control than would be preferred in French Canada. They're tough on crime. They are flat-out supporters of Israel. And all those issues, French-speaking Canadians, for the most part, take a very different view. So if you had that kind of situation continuing through several elections, you start to have an entire chunk of the country, a national community, in fact, within Canada, that's excluded from governance. I mean, I think there's no shortage of recommendations, no shortage of analysis of what's the problem in both of the countries. I think the difficulty really is in actually making something happen. Obviously, in the United States, money and politics is a very big problem. I think the Electoral College is close to dysfunctional, at least in my opinion. There are quite a range, the filibuster in the Senate, all these things would merit attention if they could get the attention. Given the focus of our work on citizenship, we've concentrated more on questions like making it easier for citizens to register to vote, and ensuring that the voter suppression techniques are not employed. One big thing I think that the United States that would make a difference if it were possible would be to have an independent redistricting commission. And as you know, the states manage that process, and California is virtually the only state that actually has an independent districting commission. And I think the rest of the Western democratic world, they all have got there long since. And the United States is very far behind in that respect. So you have these grotesquely gerrymandered districts like the Maryland 3rd District. which really do, as I said, serve the politicians, but it's impossible for a citizen to even know virtually what their district is or what it looks like. So I think if there was a real move to try to professionalize the redistricting process and get the partisan politics out of it, that would make a big difference. In Canada, I think if it were feasible to introduce an element of proportional representation, that would generate less strong political parties and therefore governments that were more reliant on other parties in the House of Commons and so on. It would reduce the kind of executive dominance of our system and might help things a bit. Another thing that I think would help would be if the House of Commons was equipped to really perform its function, which is to hold the government, the Prime Minister, accountable. And the truth is, right now, the government members in the House of Commons feel themselves to be accountable to the Prime Minister rather than the other way around.